welcome. My name is Mike Gamage. Tim Palmer is a thought leader in sourcing and back office transformation. A leader at PA Consulting, he's won a variety of industry awards from his peers. He's worked right across every aspect of sourcing, and indeed he's at the forefront in the development of business services, where his clients include some of the world's largest companies. And Tim is passionate about process. I caught up with Tim recently in London, late on a Friday afternoon. It was an impromptu video opportunity, so do please excuse the technical glitches, although I'm sure you'll agree that the content easily outshines them. And I started off by asking Tim just to explain exactly what he does.
I am one of the members of our shared services and outsourcing practice. We help organisations with their shared services and outsourcing projects. I've got two specific responsibilities. The first is I run our corporate business services service line, which is helping organisations create global business services structures, multiple functional teams, getting more out of HR, finance, IT, procurement by putting them together. And secondly, I'm an HR outsourcing and transformation specialist, having worked in the HR outsourcing space for a number of years. We've come out of a period of some sort of uncertainty, come out of the finance crisis. People have gone through a period of maybe re-evaluating their strategies for their back offices in particular. And they've now started to put in action strategies that they conceived of during that time of uncertainty. Now, having made decisions about way forward, people are going off and doing that. There's actually another thing that's driving some of the work in the sourcing space at the moment, which is renegotiations. Certainly, I work largely in the BPO sector. A lot of BPO activity, 2004, 2005, 2006, now in renegotiation, and if not in renegotiation, in strategic thinking about what comes next in those journeys. Clearly some mistakes made in that time, which are being corrected in the strategies of organisations going forward. For example, I think maybe some organisations losing some of their ability to deliver services through outsourcing. Perhaps they've lost the intellectual property that they needed to run their back office processes, and in the way that they're now approaching new outsourcing projects and shared service projects, they may be trying to rebuild some of that intellectual property. There's some interesting conversations last night with a client about how maybe the multi-sourcing agenda that we've seen, which is moving from the large monolithic outsource everything to one organisation within a function, has moved to more people picking off processes or services within a function, and maybe striking up 3 or 4, 5 different relationships, and then trying to stitch together an organisation from that. The client last night was saying maybe some of that is because of the need to rebuild intellectual property in the organisation. So I'm trying to remember and relearn how it was that I worked before, and what that does, of course, is it introduces a new challenge, one of service integration, one of how do I do that stitching together. So I've got to relearn how to do it, and then I've got to have the tools and techniques to stitch together multiple service providers and to deliver a service. And also both internal and external, of course. Well, Mike, we've talked about this a lot, you and I, over the last 5 or 6 years, and I've looked many different times for different things that could be the key defining field for a design of a shared service organisation or an outsourcing contract. I can't find another one other than the process. It's the glue that fits together all of the component parts that you need in order to deliver work. If you think about what the other options might be, it might be organisation, which is interesting, but it's not really going to glue together your technology and your metrics. It could be technology, but that's interesting because technology tends to only cover a part of what you need to do. And there's often manual things that you do outside of the technology, and even if you buy a large technology tool like an SAP with a broad scope of work, you've still got gaps either end of that and in between, where you have to go off and do manual things. Frankly, I can only find process as the language of integration for shared services and outsourcing. I think it is important to have a structured approach to process. If you're going to use process as the unifying force within your organisation, the thing that's going to tie together organisation, technology, metrics, governance, even strategy, and process is going to be the thing that's kind of your key field that runs through the organisation, it makes sense that you would have a standard way of looking after that, of defining that thing and looking after that asset. You know, I do a lot of BPO work, and I think that in a way the business process is the IPR, the way that you are going to do that work, and then of course the work instructions that sit below the process is the IPR that you need to manage that process. And think about this from the point of view of if you're outsourcing, what happens at the end of that contract if you don't have the ownership of that IPR? What happens if you want to change the way that you've managed internal shared services and you don't have that IPR properly understood? Well, you'd have to go and create it. And so if you don't have it in a standard format, if you don't maintain it, how are you going to use it other than recreate it each time you need to make a transaction happen or a change happen to the service delivery organisation? So I think having a structured platform is absolutely essential. How complex that needs to be is up for debate. And you know, I think one thing that I thought when I first saw the business process management tools come onto the market was that there might be corporate-wide process management activities. And of course there's some organisations, I'm sure some that have used your tool, Mike, who have used this on a corporate-wide basis. My experience though is it's largely limited to specific activities which then maybe it's seen as being a sort of beacon of good practice and then may get used somewhere else in a corporation. But if people can then see it for what it is and they use it for that specific activity, they'll get value out of it. I think the need to join up business processes, there's I don't know, 2 or 3 things that are happening that are making organisations and executives think that they need a strategic way of looking at business processes. The one that I work in the most is global business services, stitching together functions. When you start doing that, almost every organisation in the world that's done that has adopted some form of continuous improvement methodology, typically based on lean, not always lean. But you know, in lean thinking, it starts from the customer and it works backwards. So you start with what the customer wants to achieve, and then you work the business process backwards to fulfil the need that you're trying to deliver to the customer. And I think the second thing that really stands out from lean that's affecting this is end-to-end thinking. So it starts with the customer, end-to-end thinking backwards, and then in that end-to-end thinking, having everybody that is involved in the delivery of the service really understand where they fit in that process, understanding their part that they're playing in the end-to-end process, and using that to change mindsets. And I've always, Mike, likened this. I've drawn an analogy before to the DNA in a body, in that if every single cell in Mike Gamage's body has got a map of how to create Mike Gamage, and how to, you know, they look in that map and they go, oh look, I'm next to a nose cell, so I'm going to become a nose cell adjacent to that. And it's the same with business process. Every person within a shared service organisation or a business function can look at the map and go, these are the things that I do. I'm looking at who's next to me. This is what I'm expecting to get from this side of the organisation. This is what I'm delivering out. But by the way, end-to-end thinking is, and this is the whole process and the part I play within it, and what we deliver out the end. And I think that is one of the things that's really led to the lean thinking, and the adoption of continuous improvement methodologies has really led to this need for platforms. Governance is critical for ensuring the sustainability of the processes over the long term. I mean, you can spend millions. In fact, one of my clients I was with the other day just spent £1 million on an outsourcing provider to help them build business processes for running their outsourcing services. Now, on the face of it, that client owns that IPR, but it's held and maintained by the service provider. If that service provider doesn't own and maintain that on their behalf, they've wasted the £1 million, because in the long run, when they come to want to use it in the future, it won't actually reflect reality. So I think the key thing for me with governance is looking after the assets that you've invested in, spent money creating, making sure that they remain accurate. And the second thing is making it simple enough so that organisations don't basically abdicate their responsibility and just say, look, it's too difficult to do the management of this. We need to do this. We need to just give up on trying to make this perfect. I think if you can have a trick where you make the governance simple and everyday and part of the way of working, then that's actually one of the keys to success.